Hey, this is Nate Wells.
And this is Drew Cove.
Check out our podcast, that Go for Hockey podcast, for the latest news and updates on University of Minnesota hockey. You can find us on iTunes, and we're also on the Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
That's elite.
The Zone Coverage Podcast Network.
They may be drinkers, Robin, but they're also human beings.
Hell yeah, let's get stinko.
Welcome, Giles and the Goalie Podcast. I am Giles Farrell. Across from me is Ben Remington.
Hello.
Ben, we have a special show for our guests this week, as the regular recording Saturday night at Tin Whiskers is already going to be special enough, so we decided to cut off a little bit of that special and put it into its own special show.
That's a whole lot of special. That's kind of fitting for us.
Yeah, I was going to say, did I get enough special in that sentence?
It was very special.
Yeah, so today we have joining us Sarah McLellan of the Star Tribune, new Minnesota Wild beat writer here in the last season. But before we get to Sarah McLellan, again, just want to remind all of our lovely listeners, and for those new listeners to this show, we are having a viewing party for Saturday night's game between the Minnesota Wild and Dallas Stars at Tin Whiskers Brew in St. Paul. Check out our Facebook page, facebook.com/GATG Wild Podcast for full details, but we encourage everyone to come on out, have a beer, watch hockey, and we will record a new podcast after the game, so should be a pretty good episode next week as we record from a brewery, no less.
Right. I haven't quite figured out the logistics of it, but I'm going to try to drink some alcoholic beverages.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah, but you know me. Like, I'm going to try to have more than one.
We're going to try to have that super special show then.
That elusive
drunk
podcast, yes.
Yeah. So
very elusive.
That's what we can look forward to on Saturday. And then, of course, the next episode of the Giles and the Goalie Podcast. Also, if you haven't yet, check out our last show, episode 143, Stall Sunday.
I fully realize why the episode wasn't called Ketchup is the K-Fan of Condiments. But still a little disappointed.
Yeah, I was lazy with the editing, so...
it's understandable. You don't want to throw up a red flag. You don't want to send up a flare. I get it.
I mean, when you're done recording at 10:30 at night, then you have to edit. That goes late, so... Yeah, so, all right, without further ado, here is our chat with Sarah McLellan.
I'm really excited to talk to her. I hope our technology doesn't fail us.
Okay, cut. Joining the Giles and the Goalie podcast is Sarah McLellan, the new Minnesota Wild beat writer at the Star Tribune. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us. How is the Minnesota weather treating you?
Well, I think I'm definitely getting used to it. I think I've survived my first winter. Are we winter? Do you think I'm in the clear yet?
Well, if it's June 1st through September 30th, you're in the clear. If it's not, then
okay.
You should always expect snow.
Okay, so I'm almost there, but no, I'm enjoying it. It's definitely a change from what I'm used to in Arizona. But, you know, I've bundled up and I'm getting used to driving. I think that was the big thing, was driving in the snow and navigating the ice. So I'm feeling pretty confident these days.
if you can believe this, Minnesota drivers get worse in the summer when it rains than when it snows. So just a fair warning for you as well.
Okay, I'll keep that in mind.
So Sarah, you spent 5 years covering the Arizona Coyotes before joining the Star Tribune this past November. Just kind of as an outsider looking at the Coyotes, what was it like to kind of be a beat writer for them, as they were almost always in the news in more ways than one, and not necessarily in a good way?
Yeah, it was, like you said, there was always something going on with that team. I think they were always an interesting story, not only for, like you said, what was happening on the ice. They went through a lot of changes in that time, being owned by the league and then getting ownership and, some managerial changes and personnel changes and a coaching change. So there was a lot of growth and development and just evolution with the on-ice product, and then you add in everything that was happening off the ice in that team trying to secure, a permanent arena in Arizona, which is still an ongoing process. So it was just a team that there was always something going on. It was always interesting. It was just a lot of change and a lot of evolution. And as a journalist, that's what we love to cover is news and, to mark how something evolves over time. And so I really enjoyed that start to my career and kind of getting my feet wet in terms of becoming a hockey journalist. And it's been a really fun transition, though, coming here and learning about the state of hockey and kind of immersing myself in this culture. I've really enjoyed these last few months.
One of the first thing you wrote when you came here to the Star Tribune was your kind of introductory piece, and you kind of shared your story, your hockey background, and and the quote that really kind of stuck out to me was, "Hockey isn't an assignment or a designation at the end of a business card." Do you kind of want to share a little bit of that, your background there?
Yeah. I spent most of my life growing up in Arizona, but I'm originally from Canada. I was born in Edmonton, and we grew up right outside the city there until I was about 9 years old, I think was when we made the move to Arizona. So coming now to Minnesota, it very much reminds me of, what it was like living in Edmonton, where it was hockey 24/7. And, I really got introduced to the sport by my dad and just us watching it on TV and watching the Oilers and him kind of sharing his insights with me about what to look for and the strategy, but just his love for the game. He passed that along to me, and it's what really kind of stirred my passion for the game was, uncovering the stories and reading what was in the newspaper and the coverage, and then wanting to talk about it with my dad. And I just loved these conversations that we had. And I think as I got older and realized, I had an interest in reading and writing too, that, I could kind of keep these conversations with my dad going, by pursuing his career in sports journalism. And he just kind of took the conversation to another level with your readers and, getting to interview athletes and ask them questions and get the opportunity to share their stories. So this is, the sport's been a part of my life since I can remember. And I just hold with it, I guess, very nostalgic feelings of what it was like to be growing up and to have that bond, as a daughter with my dad, and, a love for the game that he shared with me. So yeah, it is very near and dear to my heart, and I take it very seriously. And it's a passion. Like I said, it really is something that I enjoy watching hockey every day and figuring out the stories that are there and being able to tell them and share them with other people. It's really fun.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think we all have I think those of us who, like Ben and myself, kind of, keep a very close eye on the Wild here. We always have a story or two, especially when it comes to nostalgia. You'll find us to be the most nostalgic hockey fans you'll ever meet. But always have a story or two about how we kind of fell in love with the game, and that certainly was a great way. Although I've never really heard Minnesota and Edmonton compared like that before. I guess in essence, Minnesota is like Edmonton, except without all the draft lottery picks.
Yeah, but even just, like you talked about the weather and, how the city's set up. It does remind me, and I think that's maybe part of what, made this transition so smooth. It hasn't felt like I'm coming into a completely new terrain. It has felt very familiar, especially just how much the community embraces hockey and how much the Wild matter to people. That's kind of reminded me too of that, and it's comforting. It's familiar in that way.
And you mentioned there, how much people love the Wild and hockey here. Just kind of as a new outside perspective, what are your thoughts here on just, I guess, one, the Wild, the hockey team, and then two, the Minnesota hockey culture in general?
Yeah, I think obviously I was aware of how passionate the fan base was. Covering games here when the Coyotes played, you could totally sense that vibe, just being in the arena, feeling how engaged the fans are and, how much they care. You can tell that just by watching and observing a game. But, I think what surprised me in making the move here is just how deep that love and passion for hockey is. And it's not limited to just the Wild. I think people care about what's going on in the NHL, and they have obviously an affinity for what the North Stars meant to the community. And there's college hockey and high school hockey and local minor league hockey. It's just, I think it's all levels here. And, I knew they were passionate about the Wild. I knew they cared about what that team meant to the state. But it doesn't end there. It doesn't stop there. It extends beyond that. And I think that's something that I've picked up on too. And I think too, this season has been exciting for people. I came in about mid to end of November, and, I think probably ever since maybe Christmas time, around the New Year, this has been a Wild team it's been extremely competitive. I think they kind of got the up and down phase out of their system probably in the first half, and I think the second half of the season, they've been mostly consistent, and they haven't had these long rough patches. There's been a loss here, a loss there that's maybe stung, but they've been pretty steadily on the rise. I think if you really break it down and look at the schedule and how often this team's collected points, and so I think that's probably still a lot of excitement. Optimism, because it still hasn't secured the team anything at this point in terms of a playoff spot. They're in a good position, but nothing's guaranteed, and I think that probably speaks to just the competitiveness of the Western Conference, in that, the Wild can rank, among the top, 7 to 10 teams in the league, and they don't have anything nailed down at this point. So it's been really interesting to kind of chronicle that journey, because it seemed like when I started, this was a team that was, marred by injury, and, it had suffered through a lot of adversity and was just looking for some stability. And now they've had that. And I think we've seen how much that can stabilize a team, to see the performance that they've had. It's been mostly steady, for these last few months.
Something I like to ask those who kind of work around the team is Bruce Boudreau. We have a segment purely devoted to Bruce Boudreau and a quote of the week for him, because he's always a great soundbite. Just what is it like to kind of talk to him on a daily basis? Just for us, just kind of reading all the quotes and articles or tweets. At least for me, I just kind of come away with, man, Bruce just seems like a treat to be around.
Yeah, for sure. It's been fantastic working alongside him, and getting to pick his brain on a day-to-day basis about what he thinks about the team. And that's been a really enjoyable part of the job. And, recently for him to get his 500th career win, I think it was a good reflection point. At least, I'm not sure if Bruce wanted to really go down memory lane so much, since he seems to want to keep the focus on the team and its pursuit the rest of the way. But for me, as a journalist, to look back at what he's accomplished and how he's gotten here, it's really fascinating to see the success that he's had. Now what he's trying to accomplish with the Wild. So it's been a really fun story to tell. There's actually been a lot of fun stories to tell this season. I mean, not only, Boudreau, his personal success, but how he's trying to get this team in the playoffs. But you look at Eric Stahl's season, and Jason Zucker's season, and, the emergence of some young players, Jordan Greenway, the latest example. This has really been, for as much as there's been tough times and, tough injuries and adversity, there's really, I think, been a lot of stories of, positive and hope and encouragement and optimism. And, we'll see where it takes this group, but it's been a really fun bunch to cover so far, that's for sure.
You mentioned Eric Stahl. I mean, there can't be that many more better stories in hockey this year than Eric Stahl and what he's been able to do. And, I looked it up earlier, and there's only 4 players in the post-lockout era who have scored 40 or more goals at age 33, and of course joining Jaromir Jagr. But I mean, Eric Stahl was a guy, when he signed here, his career was almost as good as dead, and now here he is, a 40 goal scorer again.
Yeah, for sure, and that's an amazing stat too. But that's the thing. Obviously his arrival preceded my time here, but I can quickly get the sense, that he came in, before last season with a purpose. And, the Wild still saw something in him. It didn't sound like the team believed that this was it and that he, had squeezed everything he could out of his career. I think they saw the body of work in Carolina and believed there has to be more for this player. This isn't, that down season that he had where he split between the Hurricanes and then after the trade with the Rangers. That wasn't the real Eric Stahl still. And so it's been really remarkable to see, Stahl kind of, prove that and show that he's still, one of the elite goal scorers in this league. I don't see how you can't assign him that distinction when, you see what he did last season and, kind of re-establishing himself, and then to go a step further this season, enjoying the likes of Ovechkin and McDavid and Malkin and Laine as someone who's scored 40 goals this season. Only a handful of players have done that, and he's included in that conversation. And I think, you can't talk about the Wild success without mentioning Eric Stahl, because I'm not sure if this team would be in the place it is if you subtracted his 40 goals and his 70-plus points. And I just think they're kind of, inseparable in terms of how one has affected the other. And in that regard, I think it'll be interesting to see if he works his way deeper into a Hart Trophy conversation. It's going to be tough to pry that award away from a Nathan McKinnon or maybe a Taylor Hall or, someone of that ilk with what they've meant to their team in terms of the turnaround that those organizations have experienced this season. But when you talk about someone who's most valuable to his team, I think that definition applies to what Eric Stahl's done this season for the Wild.
And you mentioned the Hart Trophy race, and obviously it's a very hotly debated topic on social media these days, but it's such a unique year for hockey in that we have, 8, 9, 10 worthy candidates of being, just in the top 3, whereas previous years, you only have that one front runner, and then you just have a couple of throw ends, and maybe a different year. Yeah, Eric Stahl does get on the Hart Trophy nominations at the NHL awards, but it just, I don't know, maybe it just kind of feels like he's just going to miss out this time.
Yeah, that's probably really indicative of the year that this has been in the NHL in terms of the parity. And you're right, there's not this clear-cut favorite necessarily. And I think that's because, there's no clear-cut favorite in the league either. The Predators are leading the Western Conference. The Lightning's there. You look at what Boston's done. There's just so many good teams and so many good players this season. It's tough to probably carve out your own niche when, a player like Eric Stahl is having a career-type year. And, it might not even land him on the ballot, So I think that's probably really reflective of just the state of the NHL. But it sure makes it fun to watch. It'll sure make the postseason interesting to see how it unravels, because I just don't think there's any guarantees at this point. I haven't even mentioned Winnipeg too, as a team that could potentially win it all. And those are two teams, Winnipeg and Nashville, that are in the Wild division. So it's going to get a lot more fun, I think, these next few weeks and seeing how everything solidifies and, how it all shakes out. I think it'll be a fun ride this spring.
Do you, I guess, just a few more questions here for Sarah McLellan, our guest. Do you, I guess, see a potential team that the Wild could really stack up well against in the first round of the playoffs? Like, I know Winnipeg obviously would be the team that they would play right now, but would it be preferable to play a Vegas or even Nashville, who they played very well against this season?
Yeah, for sure. You're right. As it stands now, it looks like Winnipeg will be the matchup. But if that pecking order kind of changes, I certainly think a first round matchup against Vegas versus the Wild. For that, for them to sweep Vegas in 3 games and get that last win on the road, I'm sure the team would just ooze confidence going into that type of matchup. And it's funny too because you look at the way Vegas plays, and they're a fast team, and they just kind of seem relentless in the way that they, push the pace and pursue the puck. And it's a style, though, that, the Wild hasn't had trouble containing and slowing down and finding a way to overcome. But you look at other fast teams, like a Winnipeg or a Colorado, and the team struggled with it. So I'm not sure if there's something just about the Golden Knights and the way that the schedule's lined up or what, but I think that would be a matchup that would certainly favor the Wild. And you know what, maybe the Nashville matchup too. I know they had the shootout loss Tuesday against the Predators in Nashville, but they still won the season series. For them to, I think, go 3-1-1 in the 5-game set. That should be a boost to confidence if they were to meet. I know Nashville's kind of probably, one of the most scary, if not the most intimidating matchup this postseason. They were in the finals last season. They seem very motivated. They seem very aware of what they need to do to maybe finish the job that they slipped up a little bit last year. But again, there's something about, the struggle that those teams get into, and they seem to match up, and it seems to be very even. And so when you're that close, and it's a goal here, a bounce there, I'm sure if you're a team like the Wild, you like your chances in that situation. So, Winnipeg I think it's kind of a scary matchup for anybody. I think anybody would be a little nervous to try to tackle that team right now. But having said that, to be the best, you have to beat the best, and you're going to have to go through the best teams if you're going to win it all. So I think there probably shouldn't be, fear in tackling anyone, but there's certainly, I think, some matchups that set the Wild up for maybe an easier path if they're to get in than some other routes for sure.
And then we just got our final 3 questions here. We ask this to all of our guests. The first of which is, obviously you haven't covered the Wild too long here, but do you have maybe like a behind the scenes interaction like that maybe you could share with us? Like we had Evan Spohr, who was with the Wild.com last year. He talked about Ryan Suter feeding him after Yom Kippur. Chad Graff talked about stumbling onto Ilya Bryzgalov with Russo at a Pittsburgh bar talking Ukrainian politics. It can be literally anything, but do you have something that maybe you could share?
Yeah, like you said, I haven't been around the team too much yet, but I think one thing that stands out so far to me was just that I briefly covered Devin Dubnyk when he was in Arizona, before he was traded to the Wild. And, when I looked at the roster when I was about to make the transition, I think he was the only name that I really kind of stood out in terms of, remembering that, was on the team during those 5 years that I covered the Coyotes. And I remember when I, took the job and kind of made my first appearance at XL Energy Center, I think he was one of the first guys I went up to just kind of see if he would remember me. And he did. And that was kind of reassuring in terms of, he remembered the work that I did in Arizona. And, our careers overlapped so briefly there before he was traded. I think it was maybe about half a season or so. And that kind of made me feel a little bit reassured, is that, there was someone here covered before, and you're going into a room with all new faces. But for him to remember me, I think that kind of stood out because I enjoyed covering him in Arizona, and remember, just how friendly he was to the media and accessible, and how it made our jobs a lot easier. And so that was good to kind of have that memory then, and that he remembered me and covering him in Arizona. And so that kind of set everything off on a good foot, just to know that there was a familiar face in the room who I'd worked alongside before, and I was excited to get to cover him and the whole team here in Minnesota.
And then Ben and I are pretty big hockey jersey fans/critics, so we love to ask our guests if they have a particular favorite hockey jersey, or if you're like Ben and myself, you can't narrow it down to one. Do you have a Mount Rushmore of hockey jerseys?
I do, and you know what? I think the first jersey I ever received was a Jason Arnott Edmonton Oilers jersey. Like I said, growing up right outside of Edmonton, we watched the Oilers a lot, and I'm not sure why he was kind of a player I enjoyed watching at that time. I think he was early in his career with the Oilers, and he was obviously a talented offensive player. And so I remember getting his jersey, and that was a big deal for me. That was my first jersey, and I think that's one I still have somewhere. I'm not sure where it is. It might be still at my parents' house, but I remember that one, and that just kind of, I felt like it was like a badge of honor, like I was accepted into the legion of hockey fans because I now had a jersey, and it was a really, really cool memory.
Was that after the Oilers kind of rebranded to the like dark blue and bronze, or was that still in kind of the old Gretzky jerseys?
Yeah, it was before, so it was probably like mid-90s. So it's still, they had the copper in there, but it was still the white, and that blue and the orange, and I think there was a little bit of red in there around the logo. But it was before they kind of had that third look where it was the blue with kind of like that silver, I don't know if you like a streak or whatever they had across the front of the jersey. So it was pre that. It was a white. That time that was the home. White was the home color jersey. So it was a white Oilers home Jason Arnott jersey.
Oh, that's awesome. And then the last question we have for you, Sarah, is, this is a little bit off the board, but do you consider soup to be a meal?
Oh, yes, because I love soup.
Yes.
Especially coming here when it's a cold day. I love a hearty, cream-based soup. So, yes, I eat those as meals all the time.
Well, Ben is yelling through his computer right now, and I got to take the victories when I can get them, as more people tend to side with Ben, but I am definitely in that camp that soup is a meal as well, so that is good news. Sarah, before we let you go, is there anything you want to plug?
Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Sarah_McLellan, and definitely check out my work and my colleagues' work in the Star Tribune. Pick up a newspaper, subscribe. We're also at StarTribune.com. There's lots of fabulous stories there, across news, sports, food, travel, everything. So make sure to check it out.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Perfect.
Definitely find you at the Star Tribune, and of course on Twitter at Sarah McLellan. Sarah, thanks so much for joining us here today, and hopefully we'll catch up with you again down the road.
Sounds good. Take care.
Yep, thanks.
Thanks again to Sarah McLellan for joining this otherwise fine podcast. We'll definitely try to have her back on down the line, as she does bring a lot of good hockey insight. So that we like to have insightful people on this podcast from time to time.
And we will not hold it against her that she was an Oilers fan.
Yeah, that
But the
was
same
interesting.
promises can't be made for Brian Reynolds.
No. He might unsubscribe to this podcast now.
Yeah.
If he ever
possible.
subscribed.
Probably not.
No, so thanks to Sarah again for joining this show. And again, as a reminder to everyone, do check out our watch party on Saturday at Tin Whiskers Brewery in St. Paul, downtown St. Paul. Wild and Stars are at 7 p.m. Saturday. Should be a good time. We will record after, and if you want to stick around and try to get on our otherwise fine show, you will have to wrestle a mic away from our boss, Tom Schreier. So, with that said, you can find Ben and I on Twitter at Ben Remington, at Giles Farrell. Podcast is on Twitter at GATG Wild Podcast. And again, we have a Facebook, facebook.com/GATG Wild Podcast. You can find the show on SoundCloud, iTunes. Do leave us a rating if you listen via iTunes. We are also on Google Play, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher. Really, we're anywhere. So, yeah. So with that said, we will catch you again for our next show on Saturday night.
Later.
It's not resiliency. You're making it sound like we're good. That's all. I'm done.